And that's the example that we talked about a little bit was the ChatGPT version on beneficence, which I think follows Kant a little bit. So, but yes, I did mention that some of these, like apply predicate logic to express the following scenario, that might not give you 300 words, but I'm not going to grade that based on a 300 word count. That's, frankly, just play with these, have fun with them, and don't worry about the grade, because remember, this is 101. I'm certainly not treating it as a weeder course. That used to be the case. I don't know if you had people saying that, logic, lots of people can't pass logic. Used to be the case that people couldn't pass logic because it was just a rote learning mathematics type course, which automatically weeds out people that hate mathematics and don't do well in that kind of thing. But apart from maybe needing that kind of proficiency in logic for things like the LSAT and other careers, even where you're going to have that kind of, like code writers, I'm sure, the more computers we have, the more need we're going to have for code writers. Granted, this is scary. AI is writing code now, which means, that'll save us having some people doing monotonous kind of work. Remember when I was at the NSA, the work I had was boringly monotonous, and as a result, I talked with people, got them to work on it, and then the computer took over my job and did it perfect, because all I was really doing was matching things. That's, if there's an art to it, that seems to be more difficult for AI to do. And let somebody that has a particular flair for something do that, I suppose. So yeah, have fun with this. See if you could get it in by Saturday. If not, there's no hurry on that. And I'm thinking that I might as well use it's not going anywhere. Let's go this way. I used to have a test 4. Now, should we still use this? Well, I suppose. Even this question, this is an old test 4. This would be just for our final, and it's not a final test, it's just the 4th test. So it's, the grade still works out pretty much the same way. Obviously, this is not something that I could grade based on a word count, but what you're doing is taking this particular dictionary. So in this particular test, what I set up was a dictionary, and then you had to use those in A, B, and C to basically convert those into standard English of some sort. And initially, as you're going through those and you're looking at, like A, for example, what would A stand for? Looking at the dictionary, I have there exists an X that for all Y, if X is P, then X H's Y. And so we come up and we try to figure out, okay, what are we talking about? X and Y are variables, so those can, so when you're looking at that, you can have those mean anything, variables, right? HXY is a relational predicate, and so you've got X studies harder than Y, is what that would mean. And that's your main predicate in that statement. And then the rest of it is, if X is a person, then X studies harder than someone. But there is a catch, and that is that there's no non-identity statement. So that demonstrates the nature of our everyday speech to indicate something really dumb, and that is X studies harder than everyone. Well, but X, so some person studies harder. Am I reading it right? There exists an X such that some person studies harder than everyone. But the trouble is that person is part of the everyone, and so it even means he studies harder than himself, which is just dumb. Computers will be upset with you over that. If that's the kind of code you write, you're not going to be getting promoted anytime soon. But so that's a flaw in that, and you're just supposed to maybe point out that, hey, that's a conflict, because if you just say, somebody studies harder than everyone, including themselves, by the way, which is dumb. First person I think of is Hermione Granger. You're pulling a Hermione here. Go to the library. But even Hermione can't study harder than herself, so it's a dumb thing to say. B, there exists a Y such that for any X is a person, and it's not the case that X is identical to Y. There's your non-identity statement, right? And if that's the case, then LXY, and if we go up and look at LXY, X is more logical than Y. So there exists someone, but who is that? Well, in this particular relational predicate, Y is the person that X is more logical than. So everyone is more logical than someone, and that someone is not identical to everyone else. So how would you write that? There's multiple ways you could write that, but so everyone is more logical than somebody else, maybe. These are kind of frivolous, but they're mostly there to see if you can play with the dictionary and get used to how predicate logic works. And then C, there exists a Y such that for all X, LXY, and it's not the case that YL. Now notice a neat thing here is that when you look up at the dictionary, if you have a relational predicate with L, that stands for LXY, is X is more logical than Y. But if you just have the predicate L by itself, that stands for X is a librarian. So when you're looking at this whole statement and you're trying to put it into English, what you might find yourself doing is first going step by step and then refining it as you go. But so if I start off with saying there exists a Y such that for anything you pick, Y is more, or X is more logical than Y, and it's not the case that Y is a librarian. So everyone is more logical than someone who's not a librarian. That's silly, but at the same time, the test is really trying to figure out how do these languages work. And there's multiple ways I think you could work with that, because it's a little sloppy. Using the change of quantifier rule, change the quantifier for this statement. For anything you pick, if X is P, then it's not the case that X is Q. All you have to do in a case like that is change the quantifier from for anything you pick to exists a particular thing. And if you remember how the rule works, to change the quantifier, you put a new negation sign in front of the quantifier and a new negation sign in front of the right-hand side, and you change the quantifier. So you would go from it's not the case X to it's not the case, it's not the case. There exists an X, which you can do away with the double negation and just have it's equivalent to there exists an X, such that it's not the case that if X is P, then it's not the case X is Q, right? Because you put the negation sign both on the left side and on the right side, and quantifier exchange for all four of the possibilities. That's the pattern. And then you can, of course, negotiate with, if I have two negation signs, that equates to just no negation signs, etc. So that's a really easy one. That's 10 points, but I don't know. Then we've got some short essay responses. Why does analogical reasoning break down when trying to bridge the divide between fact and value, or science and religion? What's analogical reasoning? ANA stands for, that's the Greek prefix that's equivalent to the Latin RE. And logical, of course, the pattern, right? So if you're taking an analogical argument, what you're doing is saying this pattern is similar or same as this pattern, right? And so you're making a comparison between walking a duck and walking a dog. Oh, I don't know. So, they actually, when you get right down to it, it seems like all human reasoning is analogical, because what we're doing is looking at patterns and trying to say that pattern repeats in this situation. So it seems like all of our reasoning is analogical. But when you're doing that and you're faced with the fact versus value, I mean, the one problem ever since David Hume that comes up is that if you're trying to write a deductive argument and you have a conclusion that includes a value statement, then that value statement had to come from one of the premises. Otherwise, the argument is invalid, because there's something in the conclusion that's not in the premises. Which means that the premise, at least the one premise that contains that, has to have a value judgment in it, which automatically makes it, in our contemporary way of thinking, not a scientifically provable situation. Because if you have a value in it, the statement becomes a boo hooray. Boo for this, yay for that. That sounds silly, but let me show you. That's an actual thing. Boo hooray theory. It's an informal term for emotivism. What's that? Emotion. You're getting emotional. Stop it. Oh, sorry. That's emotional. I'm in a good mood. Is that all right? We can be in a good mood. A lot of my friends are like, oh, they're crying and stuff, and I'm like, hey, isn't this a dynamic country? Look at this. You know, that's fascinating. Sorry. That's too much fun. Plus, it just proves Hegel's right. Dialectical, you know. Oh, we're liberal. Oh, we're conservative. Oh, liberal. Back and forth. It's not really as dynamic as, say, the Foucault pendulum that we have in